This is just weird to me. Let's react.
Try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. After CMT pulled his music video from the airwaves yesterday, Jason Aldean is defending his new song and music video, Try That in a Small Town. He wrote on his Instagram story today, in the past 24 hours, I've been accused of releasing a pro-lynching song, a song that's been out since May. Yes, Jason, but you released the music video on Friday. That would be July 14th, 4 days ago, so that's why people are responding on Monday, okay? And was subject to the comparison that I direct quote was not too pleased with the nationwide BLM protests. These references are not only meritless but dangerous. Well, Jason, you're seeing this while we're seeing images from the Black Lives Matter protests in the wake of George Floyd's killing.
First off, George Floyd was not murdered, was not killed. George Floyd died. Now, some people may have said that he died through negligent hands. That is up to the courts to decide, which they did. But what I'm saying is that he specifically didn't get killed. He killed himself, I guess you could say, if anything. But he basically died. He overdosed on drugs because he took too many drugs. That's what happens when you take too many drugs, you die. You know, he had a lot of illegal substances in his car, and he was actually having the police called on him because he was trying to pay for different items with counterfeit money. So he was living a very illegal life. So George Floyd was not killed. I'm just putting that out there first. And then saying that he did not agree with the BLM riots, the protests, or whatever else you want to call it. Being against the BLM is not specifically being against Black people. Black Lives Matter is what their name is, but they do not live by the name of Black Lives Matter. People like my cousins, they don't matter to them. People like my father, they don't matter. Their lives do not matter. It doesn't matter if a Black person is killed. It's just a matter of if the Black person's life that was taken by a white person and can be sensationalized. That's all that matters. So they don't really value Black lives because the majority of Black people are literally killed by other Black people. You know, we have a big issue with not realizing that, generally when we talk about murders and so forth, usually those who are getting killed by people are within their own race, basically. So Black people struggle with other Black people killing them the most. So if you valued Black lives, you would care about the crimes being committed against Black lives. You wouldn't say, oh, was it a white man who killed you? If a white man didn't kill you, we don't give a heck. That's how they basically act towards people like my father, who was killed by a Black man, who is a Black man, was a Black man. So, you guys saying that Black Lives Matter, Black lives do not matter to Black Lives Matter organization. So, they are obviously liars, okay? So being against them is actually most likely being against the fact that Black Lives Matter just use Black death from white people, which happens less often, by the way, as something to sensationalize, but not actually to fix the problem. Added to the fact that, let's be real here, 20 million Black lives have been killed through abortion, and Black Lives Matter support abortion. So they support half of our population getting exterminated by abortion, and our biggest killer is abortion. Black lives are removed by abortion more than any other any other crime, obviously, and any other health condition, any other kind of death. Nothing supersedes abortion in killing black people. So I'm just pointing this out. Like, this is the highest and the biggest killer of black people. Half of black people have been taken out of this world because of abortion. So they do not value black lives in any regard. And also on the matter of black lives, we might as well just get through the other part of this. George Floyd, for one, did not value black lives. He literally put a gun to a black woman's pregnant belly. Yeah, like black unborn babies don't have it bad enough that half of the time they're being killed by abortion. Now you also have black men like George Floyd putting guns to their heads, basically in vitro. So I'm just saying, he didn't value black lives either. He didn't value that black woman's life. He didn't value the black baby's life. Okay? So, yeah, continue though.
It won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. He goes on to say, there's not a single lyric in the song that references race or points to it. And there's not a single video clip that isn't real news footage. You like how he said that? Notice they didn't say there's not a single video clip that references race or points to it, because they all do. He's correct that there's
none of them reference any race. What are you talking about? I watched the video. I listened to the song regularly. He talks about different things. I've been listening to Jason Aldean since I was 12 years old. So, I mean, like, some people are weird. It's like you don't really know the themes of what Jason Aldean sings about. Many of the themes are about different aspects to small town environment. So, I mean, like, it's not really a shock that he would make a song like this, referencing, crime and things of that nature. Crime does not conclude to the black race. So the only one making the conclusion that crime and the black race apply to each other is you. And that's because you're a racist. Because, like, for one, you think of crime and you think black people are the perpetuators of crime, but you never think of black people as being the victims of crime, because that's the whole racist ideology of black people, is that, they cannot be victims of a crime because they are specifically perceived as superhuman. They are people who are danger to society, or like seen as people who are, like I said, the superhuman concept kind of makes it where you can never be weak as a black person, basically. So you never think that black children need to be protected. You never think that black women need to be protected. You never think black men, of course, you never think of black men being victims to homicides. And black men are the biggest population that are targeted for homicides. Nobody ever talks about black men getting targeted for, crimes against them. You never think of it that way. You only think of them as criminals because you have that racist ideology of not seeing black people as victims, but perpetrators. So the racism coming out in this video is coming from Grammy O'Neal. No one else, in my opinion, as a black person, myself. Continue.
There's not a single lyric that references race. So why is he showing images from the Black Lives Matter protests while he's singing about store robberies, hate crimes, and carjackings? Put somebody on the sidewalk, carjacking old lady at a red light. Well, while singing those lyrics and seeing those unrelated images allow him deniability. In the viewer's mind, they're linked together. So the Black Lives Matter protesters are sucker punching Asians in the street and looting liquor stores. The visual links to race don't end there.
Black Lives Matter activists are not specifically black, though. A majority of them are white. So you saying Black Lives Matter, it's like you're trying to associate black people are people who are associated with Black Lives Matter, but many of us are not. So trying to make that distinction, you're just trying to say that to imply that they're black, but they're not. many were white. That's why in the videos you see black and white people. You don't just see black people. Why are you trying to make black people into some kind of criminal that, if anyone talks against crime, that's anti-black? Why are you trying to create the idea that black people are criminals? It's that whole thing where you guys basically think that black people can't control themselves. Black people are animals. And therefore, they're criminalized because you think of black people in a very racist manner of thinking that they're criminals, that we're criminals, that we can't control ourselves, that we're violent, that we're aggressive, and so forth. But that's not reality. Continue.
Jason traveled 45 miles from his small town of Nashville, Tennessee, to Columbus, Tennessee, to shoot the music video. Odd decision, don't you think? And he shot the music video in front of the Moore County Courthouse. That is where a white mob hung a young black man, 18-year-old Henry Choate, in 1927. Henry was accused of a crime, but the white mob didn't wait for evidence or a trial or a confession. No, they killed him in...
So, for one, according to this, you're saying it's an attack on a girl or something of that nature. I don't know the story too much, but generally speaking, there are plenty of different situations where people would hang people before they went to trial and so forth for different crimes. But to me, I don't really see what does that have to do with anything. Like, because someone was walking past a place or did a video or music video at a specific place, that's not specifically talking about that that story, in my opinion. Specifically, standing in front of a courthouse makes more sense when you're talking about crime. You're not talking about the fact that somebody raped someone behind the courthouse. You're talking about the fact that it is a courthouse. We are talking about crime here. This is an appropriate place to actually talk about crime, is to talk about it in front of a courthouse. So, I don't get why you tried to bring up this story. You might as well have brought up random story where a woman was raped behind the courthouse. I mean, like, does that mean he's in favor of rape of a woman because he did a video in front of a courthouse that had a crime committed behind it at one point? No. I mean, like, this earth is very old, so I'm pretty sure every inch of earth we walk on, there's been a crime that was committed at one point or another. That doesn't mean if we do a video pertaining anything that we are supporting basically what happened at one time in life while being in the same square footage. You get what I'm saying? Like, this is such a stretch, it's crazy. Anyway, continue.
His jail cell, and then they hung him from the second floor of that courthouse. That courthouse was also the center of the Columbus race riot in 1946, where a white mob tried to lynch Thurgood Marshall. Just a coincidence, right, Jason? Let's move on.
No, Thurgood Marshall, one, is not black, was not black. Two, he is actually responsible for killing 20 million black lives. So, I mean, what good did he do for black people? I know, you wanted to try and be like, oh, he was a Supreme Court justice, so that must be a good thing for black people. A person who is not even of the black race, who is mixed race, who specifically in his time, they did have a tendency to discriminate against actual black people at as far as mixed race people like him. So, I mean, on top of the fact that he ruled in favor of legalizing abortion, which literally killed 20 million black lives. Like, to me, I mean, that didn't benefit black people. Half of the black population is dead because of Thurgood Marshall. So pretending that Thurgood Marshall was a good thing for black people actually just backfired on your ass. Oh, yeah, I know. You don't want to talk about the actual black man who actually is focusing on trying to save black lives, like Clarence Thomas, Justice Clarence Thomas, specifically, by overruling and overturning Roe v. Wade and actually saving lots of black unborn babies' lives in the South, specifically, over the past year. You don't want to talk about that because it's all about politics at the end of the day. It's not really about race, now is it? It's about your political interests. So stop trying to call people racist because they politically don't agree with you, because that's all this really is about. You're trying to smokescreen, and it's really annoying.
As many pointed out, I was present at Route 91 where so many lost their lives, and our community recently suffered another heartbreaking tragedy. No one, including me, wants to continue to see senseless headlines or families ripped apart. I fully agree with that statement, Jason. What does that have to do with your song or your video? To use your own words, there's not a single lyric or single video clip that references mass shootings or points to it. So why bring that up, Jason? I know why you brought it up. You know why you brought it up. Do I really need to go here, Jason? So you want me to entertain this idea that that's what your song was really about, even though there's no lyric reference to it or visual?
Yeah, it is actually. The part where he's talking about specifically the roundup with carrying guns and so forth. He is, I think in that part, he is talking about like violence in that regard, and things of that nature. So to me, I mean, like you saying that he's not referencing the shooting in Vegas at his concert, at Jason Aldean's concert, is absurd because he's literally referencing in the second hook about how if there was ever a roundup for small towns, good luck, basically, because they'll always be they'll always support the right to carry, and right to carry guns and so forth, right to bear arms. So to me, I mean, like this, I don't understand why you would say that he wasn't talking specifically about the situation in Vegas, because it seems like that's what he was exactly talking about, or similar situations to that. Anyway.
Reference to it, but okay. Try opening fire on a crowd in a small town and see how far you get. How would it have been different if it was in a small town, Jason? And even if I entertain the idea that you're talking more generally, try mass shootings in a small town? Jason, tragically, that's where they're mostly happening. Route 91 was a terrible event. I'm so sorry that you're there at that event. 61 people died, Jason. 61 people died. It has nothing to do with your song. You brought that up for sympathy. You're using those 61 people that died for a shield to your racism. That's disgusting, Jason. Shame on you. Try that in a small...
No, I think you didn't want to admit that that's what he was talking about. That's what you cherry picked out of the song. You don't want to talk about everything that was talked about in that song because you want him to seem like he's racist, because you support an organization that uses Black death as a way to make money rather than to actually help Black lives. You don't want to actually say that Black Lives Matter. You don't want to actually, get justice for Black victims of crimes, of murder, and so forth. You don't care about actually getting justice for Black lives. And I mean, like, there's a lot of black death and Black murders against Black men, especially, and Black women and Black children, and they go so unsolved because no one puts value in Black victims. No one likes to think of Black people being the victim because of the superhuman concept of racism against Black people and the sense of animalizing Black humans and acting like their pain isn't real pain. It all goes back to slavery, I think, and the mentality of Black people during slavery and so forth. But yeah, to me, I mean, like, I think that's your main issue here, is that that's why you think that thinking of crime as bad has to do with black people, because black people are perpetrators, not victims. You know, if black people are not to be protected, basically, because they are never victims, they are never weaker, they are never targeted. You think of them as being criminals and therefore trying to protect them from the penal system, when most of the time black people are not criminals. Most black people aren't criminals, as much as you would like to think they are. They're not. So, I don't know, that's just all I have to say there. You trying to act like he wasn't talking about the Las Vegas shooting. He's talking about crime, and you would think he wouldn't be talking about a crime he witnessed himself, was involved himself. He's talking about several different crimes, and you don't think he would be referencing at any point a crime in which he witnessed 61 people die in. Yeah, anyway.
Town for me refers to the feeling of a community that I had growing up, where we took care of our neighbors, regardless of differences of background or belief, because they were neighbors and that was above any differences. Well, just to let you know, Jason wasn't born in a small town, wasn't raised in a small town, nor does he now live in a small town.
That was a lie. Why are you lying over and over again now? That's just funny. But
Jason was born in 1977 in Macon, Georgia, and he lived there till he was 21, so 1978. Here's the population of Macon at the beginning of each decade that he lived there. In 1978, Jason moved to Nashville.
Yeah, that is a small city. 100,000 people. I don't understand. I guess maybe it's concept and understanding that people think differently depending on who you talk to. If you come from, for example, I'll use myself as an example. If you come from Chicago, and I don't come from Chicago, but family comes from Chicago, and they go to a place called Grand Rapids, they call the city Grand Rapids a small town, a small city, so forth. The technical concept of it, I don't know, maybe it's a medium city, but it's certainly not a large city. 100,000 people is not a big city. Where are you from that you think 100,000 is a big city? To me, honestly, people who live in cities less than 100,000 are small cities, basically, small towns. I lived in Oshkosh for a little while. God, that was a fucking small town. That's it. It was a fucking small town. In Grand Rapids, like I said, I was taught that I lived in a small town. And then when I went to Oshkosh, I really understood. I was like, oh, I live in a really small town. Now I live in I guess a small town, but I'm coming back. I want to go actually to a big town again. But the point is that, saying that he didn't live in a small town when the place he lived in had barely over 100,000 people, that's pretty much the same size as Ann Arbor, and Ann Arbor is a small city. So, you're a liar at this point, because why are you trying to say he did not grow up in a small city or a small town, so to speak? He specifically sings about living in a small town very often. You don't know what you're talking about, obviously. I've listened to him since I was 12 or 13 years old. It was actually I think I was right before 13 years of age. Yeah. Because it was that fall that I started listening to more country music. And when I started listening to country music, I automatically listened to a lot of Jason Aldean, because Jason Aldean has a bit of country music and a bit of rock influence to his music. And for me, having grown up with a lot of hard rock, alternative rock, I like every type of genre that I listen to have a bit of rock edge to it. Anyway, so I fell in love with his music very quickly, early on. But my whole point is that, he specifically talks about a lot of aspects of living in a small town in several of his songs. And I've heard that since I was like a teen, okay? So I don't think he was just waiting, plotting, and basically just waiting until now to try and put something out there that made you think that it was racist or something by talking about life in a small town when he regularly talks about life in a small town. So continue.
Nashville, which at that time had a population of 715,000. My political views have never been something I've hidden from, and I know that a lot of us in this country don't agree on how we get back to a sense of normalcy, where we go at least.
Oh, that's another thing. If he lives in a city that has 700,000 people in it, and then, but was before in a city that was 100,000, that city would be considered small in reference to what he's living in. Like, for example, living in Vegas, where it's, a million or close to a million people in the city, we do consider Reno a small town. You didn't know that? We consider the city Reno a small town. It's considered a small town. Are you going to have a heart attack over that? Because Reno has 200,000 people there. What are you saying here? What do you think Reno is? What kind of city is Reno? If Reno isn't a small town, then what is it? It is a small town. It's considered the biggest little town. So it's considered a small town. So, yeah. Anyway, continue.
Day without a headline that keeps us up at night. But the desire for it too, that's what this song is about. Very vague, eh? What is this normalcy that Jason is talking about? Is it before there were carjackings or liquor store or convenience store robberies? I mean, I don't even know when that was.
No, normalcy with certain cities, yeah, there are aspects to smaller cities who experience a lot less crime than bigger cities do. You didn't know that smaller cities sometimes have less crime, and, it's better, it seems more peaceful, seems more comfortable to live in a smaller city where there's less going on and it's more normal than a city that is big and bustling and lots of crime is going around pretty much on a very everyday basis, I remember when I lived in Grand Rapids and we would hear the crazy stories about what happened in Detroit. Every now and then you would hear these crazy stories because it would have to get really bad that it went over into Grand Rapids news where they were reporting it. But whenever we heard the stories about what happened in Detroit, I remember it would be like, oh my God, My mother never wanted to be 2 hours away from Detroit because of how dangerous Detroit was. That's how bad it was living in Michigan. You never even wanted to even be anywhere in the close vicinity of a city that was in the vicinity of Detroit because of that. So yeah, smaller cities, there is more of a peace situation. There's more normalcy. There's less things, there's less crimes, things of that nature. I remember when people would get killed and so forth, there were more times where there was more reporting of, it was more of a big deal in certain areas than, say, in a bigger city where, a murder happens pretty much very often because it's a bigger city. More people are getting killed regularly, And, for example, a smaller city, homicides are less often. This is why, technically, in my family, we talk about homicides, you get a lot more coverage, I guess you could say, in a smaller city when you get a homicide than in a bigger city where there's a lot more people getting killed. And I've had like several family members that were specifically covered because of that. But I guess to you, they wouldn't matter because they weren't killed by white men. They were killed by black men. So apparently, you would not even pay attention to that even happening because you can't talk about black victimhood unless a white man is involved, right? Anyway.
From the images he shows us in the video, the normalcy is before people protested the unlawful killing of a black man in the streets. And white people could ignore the rule of law.
It's not really the unlawful killing of a black man if you're talking about George Floyd because he overdosed on drugs. I mean, it was illegal for him to take all those drugs. That was illegal. That was not within what specifically you're supposed to do in the parameters of our law, but it wasn't specifically that anyone purposefully killed him in an illegal fashion because he did it to himself. So you can't really call it what you're calling it.
Hang a black man from the second floor of that courthouse. And when it comes to the headlines that keep Jason up at night, clearly he's not losing any sleep over the January 6th insurrection because there's no footage of that in the video.
What does that have to do with anything? The fact that you politically want it to be politically motivated in your direction. That's what it has to do with. So this whole anger that you had was just saying, I'm angry. He politically doesn't agree with me. He specifically talked about an organization I support. And I want to make him seem like a racist so other people can dislike him and think he's hateful instead of addressing what he's talking about. Because you can't really argue with him on the facts because it's the indefensible, basically, at the end of the day. So I just wanted to just basically show, like, obviously in this situation, Also, I want to show one other thing on this because he does go on to say one other thing that I think is very important, and I want to address this.
For instance, spitting on a cop, Jason, why not make the lyric killing a cop? Because one cop died on January 6th, and 3 more have died since then by suicide. But the spitting is what you're losing sleep over. Okay. Jason, not only is your song and your video extremely offensive, the fact you're now releasing this...
Talking about someone committing suicide after an event, what the heck are you doing? So you're saying police officers committed suicide. What does that have to do with anything? For one, well, I'm not even going to go there, but saying someone committed suicide, obviously nobody killed a cop. And also, another thing is, with that whole thing of that one police officer dying, I don't believe he died because anybody else tried to kill him. So trying to lie again, you're just continuously trying to lie, but you're not actually talking about the truth. He addressed BLM protesting. That was the issue, okay, that he was talking about. You tried to make it about race. It failed, obviously, because you're not very good at hiding your motives. Continue.
Statement, being appalled that people think you're racist. Shame on you, Jason, for all of this. I didn't really know you or your music very well before.
That's what I wanted to address. How are you going to talk about someone's music and what they talk about regularly when you've just admitted you don't even know their music? You don't even know what he talks about. This is what he usually talks about. You didn't even know he talks about this normally. He usually talks about other stuff, of course, but he talks about a lot of aspects of living in a small town. And it's not racist because he's just talking about aspects of living in a small town. It's not specifically about anyone's race. So, you trying to claim that it was racist, it's not racist. You're just upset and angry that, he's talking about an organization that you support. You feel like he is talking about you and your criminality, I think you feel like he is talking about white people who are BLM activists who basically, were criminalized and were problematic individuals and, not good citizens of the United States, People who are pro-crime like yourself, are indefensible. And you're indefensible, so you have to smoke screen and try and say someone's racist. But the reality is, you trying to say someone is racist because they are talking about crime implies you associate crime with black people, which means you are racist. So in the end, you have exposed yourself. Thank you for exposing yourself, Grammy O'Neal. That's all I have to say today. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe, comment down below, and have a great day. Bye, guys.